Guys, this is the second video for this week. If you're watching this one first, that's fine, but technically it's the second one. So I wanted to do another focus on video that's about a whole system instead of just about one cell type, so that you could have a second example if you chose this sort of thing for your project. So I'm going to focus on the endocrine system just because I think it's sometimes underappreciated and super important and super interesting. So I'm just going to do a quick little overview of how it works and what it is. So first of all, the endocrine system is made up of glands, which are hormone producers. So I'll say that the endocrine system is hormone producing glands that send signals around the body. So basically, the function of hormones is to be chemical signals that make you feel certain things or do certain things. Um, Almost everything that you do is a result of hormones. So your metabolism, how quickly you break down food, um, maintaining your blood sugar, um, growth, your sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen have a lot to do with how you act and how you feel. And they're super interesting. They do a lot to control you and your actions and your mood. Another one is adrenaline. Obviously, that has a big impact on how you act. That's adrenaline is what has like mothers lifting cars off of their children and some really crazy human stuff. So they're really powerful, even though they're microscopic little chemicals, which is kind of what I like about them. There are many important glands in your body, but three that I'm going to focus on in this video are the pancreas, the thyroid, and the hypothalamus. So your pancreas is, I guess, technically part of your digestive system, but it's responsible for regulating blood sugar, which is really important. Because if your blood sugar is too high or too low, it can have really drastic effects on your body's ability to function, which you may know if you are diabetic or you have a family member or a friend who has diabetes. You may have had experience with that. If your sugar is really low, it's called hypoglycemic. And if it's really high, it's hyperglycemic. Kind of like hypo and hypertonic, like we talked about at the beginning of the year, where hyper is too much and hypo is too little. Insulin is the hormone that does this. So this reduces sugar in blood. But you actually have another hormone that is responsible for releasing sugar in case your sugar is low, and that's called glucagon. So this increases sugar in blood. So this goes back to homeostasis and keeping things stable. Your endocrine system is really important in doing that. So your insulin and your glucagon work together to make sure that the level of sugar in your blood is the right amount for you to be functioning. The sugar that comes from glucagon being released is actually from your liver, where you've stored glycogen, which is, you might remember this from like the very beginning of the year, but it's animal starch. You have glucose that's stored in your liver in the form of glycogen. And when glucagon is released, it stimulates your liver to break up that glycogen and release it as glucose. And then when insulin is released, it triggers your body to take up the sugar and store it. So they work together. The second gland that I wanted to talk about is your thyroid. And your thyroid's located in your throat. It's a butterfly-shaped gland, like right towards the front of your throat. And it is responsible for regulating metabolism. So regulates metabolism. And it uses hormones that are called T3 and T4, thyroid 3 and thyroid 4. But they're really important. So you're kind of just like I was talking about with blood sugar. Hypothyroidism means that your thyroid isn't releasing enough hormones, and hyperthyroidism means that your thyroid is releasing too many hormones. And so if you see, or I guess you wouldn't see it, but if you yourself ever experience this, like a very drastic weight gain or weight loss that is unexplained, it could be related to the thyroid because it's responsible for controlling that metabolic rate of you breaking down your food. Another interesting thing about thyroids is that the hormones have iodine in them, which is an element we talked about at the beginning of the year. Um, a long time ago, goiters were really common, which is a swollen thyroid because of lack of iodine. And so, what the government started doing is iodizing salt, which, if you look at your salt, if it's just like the regular kind, not like the pink Himalayan one or anything like that, but if it's just regular salt, you might see on there that it's iodized, and that's because of thyroids, actually, because goiters were like a really big problem, and adding iodine to salt basically cured the goiter problem, which is crazy and really cool. Too bad everything isn't that simple. And the last gland that I'm going to talk about today is your hypothalamus, which is in your brain section. And it is responsible for releasing hormones that control other glands. And hormones that do that are actually called tropic hormones. So that looks like tropic, but it's not, it's tropic. So those hormones would be released by the hypothalamus, and then they would go to your thyroid and tell your thyroid, hey, you need to release this hormone and break down this food. Um, so it's really important. You have a few glands in your brain, but your hypothalamus is one of the major ones that is responsible for controlling other hormones that are in your body. And then I'll just put a definition of hormones down here, that they are specific chemical messengers. And what I mean by that is that they will have a specific target cell or organ and a specific target response. So, like insulin only has one specific response, and that's to lower your blood sugar. They'll only ever do that. They have one job, kind of like enzymes, one job. All right. So last thing I wanted to talk about for this video is an example of how hormones are used to manage homeostasis in your body, and that's using something called feedback. So there are two types of feedback, positive feedback and negative feedback. And I'm going to actually talk about negative feedback first because it's what your body uses most often. And so what happens with negative feedback is hormones are used to counteract a stimulus in the environment. So that will make sense about how that maintains homeostasis. The easiest example is with temperature. So when it's hot outside, your body will start to sweat, which cools down your body through evaporative cooling. Also, your blood vessels will dilate, which means they get wider, and that allows more heat to evaporate. That's actually why like your face gets red when you're hot, because your blood vessels have like expanded. Um, and those things will counteract the heat in your environment to cool you down. Same thing when it's cold, the opposite will happen. So you'll start to shiver. That generates heat, kinetic energy in your muscles, and your blood vessels will do the opposite. They'll shrink down. So I actually have like pretty poor circulation when it's cold, to the point where like my blood vessels will shrink so much that the tips of my fingers will turn white, which you might have experienced. I think it's actually a syndrome, but I'm not super worried about it. It is uncomfortable, like it tingles, but it's okay. So those are both examples of negative feedback where your body wants to get back to neutral. So it uses hormones to handle that. Positive feedback is the opposite. So this is hormones are used to enhance a response to a stimulus. And the only example of this that I really am familiar with is actually contractions during childbirth. And so when a woman is giving birth, the contractions get shorter and shorter and stronger and stronger. The contractions are literally like the muscles contracting to push the baby out of her body. Um, Childbirth puts someone completely out of homeostasis, but it's worth it because you're like continuing the species. That's true for all animals, not only for humans. So this is contractions during labor slash childbirth. And that's controlled completely by hormones, enhancing the rate of the contraction to push the baby out. So that's my quick little overview of the endocrine system. Again, there's lots more that you could dive into here if you're interested, but overall, hormones are really cool, tiny little microscopic molecules that make you feel your feelings and do weird things. And that's what I love about them. So, hope you enjoyed. Miss you lots. See you soon. Bye.